Hello everyone, and welcome to our first Alliance webinar for 2021. I think we've already had our first technical malfunction there trying to show you a quick video that was unsuccessful. But anyway, welcome to the 3 p.m. Bad News Bulletin. And I do really love the title that Judith has used for this. It brings back really vivid memories for me and the conversations that I had with my own children, and probably, of course, just how badly I actually managed those. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Lauren Bridge and I'm the Executive Officer of the Alliance of Girls' Schools. I do hope that 2021 has started well for you, despite some lockdowns, border closures and remote learning already experienced by some. And so, yeah, welcome back today, Melburnians. So just wherever you are, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us today. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Judith's presentation will go for about 45 minutes. We are recording it, and we will make that recording available to you afterwards. But please be aware that the material presented by Judith is actually her intellectual property, and it can't be reproduced without her permission. Now, if you're new to Zoom, and I doubt really that anyone is in that category these days, we're going to be using the Q&A feature of Zoom to submit questions during the session, and Judith will answer those questions at the end of her presentation. So you'll find that Q&A button down in the Zoom menu bar. And just be aware that in a Zoom webinar, the questions can be seen by everyone. They're not just between you and Judith. Once someone has submitted a question, you can upvote that. So that's just using the thumbs up to like it. Or you can actually add a comment to an existing question. So yeah, that's it for Zoom webinars. So let me introduce you to Dr. Judith Locke, who I'm sure really needs no introduction to this audience, as it seemed from our pre-polling that many of you are already familiar with Judith's work and have read her books. But perchance that you haven't, her two books, The Bonsai Child and The Bonsai Student. And again, Judith, kudos on those names. Yeah, fantastic and inspiring. But Judith also writes a column for the Sunday Mail, which is a Queensland newspaper, in addition to her day job as a clinical psychologist with a busy Brisbane-based practice. Judith is a former teacher and a former school counsellor, and I've just learned a former drama teacher. So, you know, feel free to put her on the spot with some impro. She has worked in girls' schools, and so she's certainly an advocate for empowering girls. And she's been a great friend and supporter of the Alliance over the years. So thank you, Judith, for the time and the effort that you've put into making this webinar happen today. And you take it away now.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Now I'm just going to share my screen for everybody. So let me just do that. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay, hello everybody. Thanks so much for the introduction and also the opportunity. The stuff that I'm talking about is so important, and what I'm really hoping to get out of today's session, for you to get out of today's session, is for you to get some really good ideas about preventing the problems that I talk about today. So many of you will be aware of those, and so I'm really trying to make sure that schools in general, and this is really what I devote most of my time to now, studying the prevention of the sorts of problems that I'm actually speaking about today. Now, before I go on, there's just a couple of things I want to just sort of explain with this. I'm actually primarily talking to you as educators today and not as parents. Now, I talk differently to parents, and I kind of take them on a very slow journey to sort of work out that what they're doing might be just, you know, well-intentioned, but a bit too much and not actually doing as much benefit as what they're aiming for. So that's what, that's the way I do it, okay? But today I'm taking shortcuts, and I have to take shortcuts because I've only got 45 minutes. So I'm kind of taking shortcuts onto the problems of modern parenting, etc. So just be aware that this is a different talk as what I'd give to parents, and also just keep your teacher hat on if that's possible. I know it's often very hard. The other thing I'm assuming is that all parents are doing the best job they know how. Nobody's, sitting there and going, oh, how am I going to ruin my child tomorrow? Oh, I know, I'll do everything for them. There is, and call the school on any minor inconvenience. There's no way they're doing that deliberately. They're doing it with the best of intentions. And as I often say, the parenting that I'm describing is actually some of the hardest parenting that's ever going to be done, because it's highly effortful, also with the best of intentions, and often has quite a bit of a kind of kicker problem that occurs after a while of parenting this way, which I'll talk about in the slides today. So I just, it's with the best of intentions. The other thing is, of course, I'm not speaking about every parent, all right? That not all parents are the same, of course. And the problems I'm discussing, which is primarily on the highly effortful end of parenting, which is why those parents are so eager to find out exactly what's happened at school that day. So those parents are kind of at the upper end of effort in terms of parenting. Of course, there's some middle sort of bits of effort in parenting where they're a little bit concerned, but not so concerned that they're eagerly sort of looking for a school problem every day. And of course, there are some parents that don't do enough monitoring of their child, that don't respond appropriately when their child mentions an issue at school. So, but I'm just primarily focusing on that upper end today. The other thing, it's what I'm saying is very much relevant for Australian audiences, for New Zealand audiences. And really, if you look at the sort of, the downloads of my articles on overparenting, it appears to be happening across the world, okay? So, so it's not, but I will definitely keep it in context with both Australian and New Zealand schools. Okay. All right, so the session today, what I'm going to be doing, first of all, is I'm going to be looking at the parenting environment and the way that parenting has changed. For those of you who've taught for a number of years, you will know that parenting has changed quite enormously. And I know I'm an old teacher, ex-teacher, but once a teacher, always a teacher. And I've certainly seen the changes. And what's very interesting for me is that I left teaching to go into psychology in 2001. And when I started coming back into schools at around 2013, 14, I was seeing a huge change in that time. Like the environment of schools shocked me in the difference. So, so I'm very much talking about how parenting has changed today, but I'm also talking about the school environment and the way that has changed, and it's to a certain degree because of parenting changes, but it's also because of altered definitions of care, okay, and what is adequate care for children. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3 different kind of what I see are kind of classic parenting situations at that kind of the moment the child gets into the car to be driven home, or the moment the child walks into the door after getting off the bus from school, okay? So I'm talking about 3 classic areas, and kind of primarily younger, then kind of middle school, and then kind of older years. So that's what I'm doing. But then what I'm doing is I'm going to talk about solutions, okay? And some of the solutions to the sort of issues. Okay, all right. So let's look now at the parenting environment first. Okay, so look, the parenting environment right now is dominated by overparenting. I know this because approximately, in my research, about 40 to 60% of parents in independent schools or Catholic schools were adopting an overparenting approach. So overparenting, like the name suggests, is too much of a good thing. So doing too much of. So what I primarily it is altered definitions of what is an ideal childhood. So very much parents are focusing on giving their child constant and consistent happiness and success. Okay, and very much concerned that their child is always happy and always successful. And unfortunately, because parents are busy, okay, and because very much we are not very good at uncertainty now. So we want instant kind of success with almost everything. So what many parents are doing are kind of taking 4 shortcuts to self-esteem. Okay, so to get the child happy and successful, 4 main shortcuts that I see them doing. The first one is extreme responsiveness. Now, responsiveness is the kind of nice bits of parenting, like hugs and praise and quality time and all those sort of nice bits of. And what parents are doing is not just being highly responsive to their child, but some parents are being extremely responsive to their child. And what that means is there's extreme effort to make them feel good all the time. This is primarily, I've got to say, shown in praise. Okay, so they're consistently giving excessive praise for what the kind of accomplishment warranted, or actually unwarranted praise. So just, you know, that kind of regular reassurance that's coming on a regular basis. Come on, you're doing amazing, you're doing wonderfully. You can see it called from the sidelines at the netball game, or, you know, that consistent kind of, I've just got to say nice things all the time to my child. The other thing is a life of abundance, giving them everything, you know, giving them the childhood of their dreams. But the other thing parents are doing, and these were the 2 factors that are very much shown in my scale of overparenting that I developed as part of my PhD. The second thing is parents are often misunderstanding what is a good relationship with their child and going too far with that, and then describing their child as their best friend. Now, this particularly happens with mothers and daughters, I've got to say. To a certain degree, it happens with fathers and sons, but I see it happening much more with mothers and daughters, or sometimes fathers and daughters. But really, the trouble is with this, it's not a normal friendship. It is a friendship that's kind of very child-centered. So it's a friendship that focuses very much on the child and not the child's needs and not the parents' needs. Much more the sort of child gets their way in it. So it's not truly a best friend relationship, okay? It's based on enormous amounts of compromise with the parent and by the parent. And often if the parent is choosing that all the time, then they tend to let their own friendships wither, which is understandable in a parenting journey anyway, but it sort of goes a little bit further than that. Okay, so the second thing that's happening in terms of a shortcut is it starts in that kind of to be responsive enough is really super believing in your child, and not just, you know, believing that they're going to be okay and believing, you know, in their skills and their worthiness of love, but going to an extreme sort of thing where you can be whatever you want to be, you can do whatever you want to do. And unfortunately, what happens is in this environment of excessive praise starts to become extreme pressure on the child to do well all the time. So if you are telling your child before they go to school for the first time tomorrow that they're going to be amazing, the child's worried, oh, what's going to happen at school? Don't worry, you're going to be amazing. You're going to make heaps of friends. The teacher's going to love you and all of that sort of thing. So the child walks in with greater expectations. So over time, that can start to feel like pressure, even when a parent is going absolutely nuts over the child getting an A on their report card. A child can start to feel that as pressure to get an A the next time. So it's with the best of intentions, but it unfortunately has some negative outcomes. It's not even just that. There's also pressure on the child to be friends with the parent, and pressure on the child to be happy and successful all the time. So all with the best of intentions, but you can understand why there is an increase in anxiety in the current environment. The third thing is actually to kind of give children success all the time, and certainly a lack of disappointment in their life. There's often a parent effort into making them not face tricky things. So what ends up happening is the demands on the child start to be reduced because demands might fail. You know, if you are making your child bear the consequences, your high school child bear the consequences of not doing their homework and allowing the school to give them a poor mark, parents get very worried about that, okay? They get worried about the consequence. So they're probably likely to keep reminding their child in the upper years to do their homework, or even in the university years, but also not allowing them to face age-appropriate challenge. So my research showed that they're, you know, not allowing their 17-year-old to learn how to drive or whatever age it is in your state or country. But, you know, that sort of whole sort of I will protect them and continuing to protect them even when they should really be learning how to face challenge. The fourth thing is that there's a lot of parental control over children's experiences, to the point where parents are showing up to the first day of university, and parents are even calling employers, about it. So a lot of parent presence in a child, even in their young adult years. And so what that stops is any sort of sense of autonomy in the child. The child very much heavily leans on the parent for many, many years, and years beyond when they should be leaning on the parent. And they lack confidence because they think they're only good enough if their parents sort of there helping them, or if their parents supporting them. And then they have those expectations of other adults in their life as well. Now, the big thing with overparenting, and the biggest impact we've seen, is on overparenting and children's mental health. To a certain degree, it's parents' mental health as well. But let's just focus on children right now. So the thing is, and it's very ironic because what parents' efforts to build children's self-esteem all the time, what unfortunately their efforts are doing, and all this shortcutting of making them happy and successful all the time, is that a child is only ever used to being happy and being successful. So when they actually face any sort of challenge in the future where they are not protected by the parent or overly supported by the parent, they will falter, okay? And that's because children lack a lot of the essential skills. So what they're doing is they don't have the skills that are going to enable them to face challenge, to thrive in environments, to fit into environments, etc. So I just want to go through each one. I say there are 5 essential skills, and they're all R's, although one is a faux R. But anyway, they're all R's. Sort of. So the first one I want to talk about why it's not happening. And there's an entire chapter on this in The Bonsai Student. So my second book. So the first one is resilience. Resilience is the ability to face difficulty. Now, you only develop resilience if you have experience, age-appropriate experience of facing difficulty. So if your parent protects you from facing difficulty, you will not develop resilience at all. The second one is self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to stop current pleasure for future gain. So going to bed at the right time so you don't wake up tired. Now, when a parent is continually organizing their child and reminding them to do things and not allowing them to face the consequences of their choices, then the child will not learn self-regulation. And as I say to parents, particularly at the good schools I talk to in Australia and New Zealand, ironically, the very skill that has made those parents so successful, their own self-regulation, they give all the riches and the kind of rewards of their high levels of self-regulation just to their child without their child doing anything, all right? So they don't build the very skills that made them successful, all right? So it's really a terrible shame that occurs. So then the third skill is resourcefulness. Again, resourcefulness is solving a problem that you're facing right now, okay? So it's actually not just facing it, but solving it. Resourcefulness is developed by having to solve your problem. So turning up at school, not having your lunch and working out what to do, okay? Or even working out at short notice a very good lie for the teacher why you don't have your homework. So yes, lying's not great, but it actually shows resourcefulness, all right? And if a child is just used to the parent dropping the homework off and all of that, they're not going to learn how to be resourceful themselves. The fourth one is respect. Respect is not just for authority, but it's for the rights of others as well. And in a very child-centered environment, a child will not learn respect for others, okay? And so they'll want to play their games at lunchtime and they'll dominate conversations. And the last one is responsibility. Responsibility very much is sort of not only feeling that you're important, but feeling others are important and actually putting in work for the good of others. Big area for building responsibility is actually chores, okay, getting kids to do chores. Now, because they don't have these essential skills, what ends up happening is that we are seeing an increase in research. There's more and more coming out all the time that talks about the impacts of overparenting. And what we know it produces more anxiety, depression, a sense of entitlement or narcissism, reduced regulation of emotions, so not able to sort of manage and deal with emotions as they come up, indeed almost catastrophizing minor kind of melancholy or minor kind of worry about something, catastrophizing that because it feels so unfamiliar to them. They also have reduced life skills because a lot of them haven't been forced to make that phone call, to have a tricky conversation with that teacher and that sort of thing. They've been protected from that so they don't develop those skills. So let's look now, we've talked about the kind of parenting environment. Let's look now at the school environment. Okay, so first of all, one of the sort of big things that have changed in terms of school environments is the expectations on schools. Now, what is often happening is that parents are expecting primarily responsiveness to their child from schools and not really putting up that well with demandingness, okay, of children facing age-appropriate consequences. And so what is coming is this sort of expectation of extreme warmth to students all the time from teachers. And what's the big thing, the problem about this is that students get very used to very regular reassurance, being told all the time how well they're doing, how amazing they are. And this is the biggest thing I see with my university students that I work with, is that they cannot cope unless they're regularly being reassured, and they don't cope very well with constructive criticism. They see it as being mean or nasty. Of course, not all, but some of them. So they're expecting this kind of feeling of sort of sweet words and being told they're successful, all right, all the time. And so then age-appropriate demands are viewed as harsh. So if the child is experiencing disappointment, they don't get class captain, or difficulty, they're just having some challenges in sort of learning this little bit of, you know, how to do some sort of skill in volleyball or something like that, or they experience a consequence of a poor choice, like behaving badly. Parents tend to push back against that. Okay, again, some parents. And so then in that environment, they can, particularly if they have gone out of their price bracket for schooling, they are sometimes buying what they see as being success and happiness. And so when the school is not providing that sense of success and happiness, then they're viewing it as a school failure. There's also an expectation of students' experiences being very highly tailored. So, and one, I'm really noticing that, I notice that a lot, I've got to say, with psychologist reports as well, this sort of real expectation that the school will completely adjust everything to suit this child who's got anxiety in the class or something like that. But not only that, there's kind of an expectation that they will emerge from school a diamond. So they come into the school a kind of sapphire or something, but they'll end up you know, this kind of diamond sort of perfect thing. And I see this particularly, like about 40, we know from research about 40% of parents will describe their child as shy, but there are many parents who are kind of expecting schools to take that shyness out of the child and to give them this kind, you know, almost completely different personality through reward, success, happiness, and all of those sorts of things, which is, you're basically saying, I want you to change my child's personality, okay? And there's nothing wrong with someone being a little bit hesitant. If anything, it's sometimes respectful to hold yourself back, okay, and not be pushing yourself forward into every situation, okay? It can start to become quite narcissistic. Now, the other real problem is with parents shopping for schools as much as they do, when you've got all this kind of really big choice about where am I going to send them to school, this is involving much greater distances then to get to school, because they are not sending them to the local girls' school, to the local Catholic school, to the local Anglican school, but they are often crossing town to get their child into these schools. And what ends up happening, unfortunately, for many of these children is they're actually being ferried for a lot longer. They are in the car a lot longer. And that is where a lot of the problems occur, because we know that, for example, if your partner picks you up from work this afternoon, it is highly likely that all the way home you're going to discuss work, because there's a permission given that if you pick somebody up from a place, you discuss that place all the way home. So what you end up when parents are driving long distances, much more kind of analysis of what's happened that day, okay? Much more, how was lunch, how was school, how was your teacher, how was this, how was that, and a lot more kind of almost, expecting this kind of report card from the child as, marking the school in every single area. Okay, now, not only that, but teaching has changed as well. Teachers have very changed beliefs about good enough responsiveness. So because of the current environment of care now, to a certain degree, parents have put pressure on them with the things I've just discussed, but also teachers themselves, in the research I've done with teachers actually are kind of indicating characteristics which are very reminiscent of overparenting. I do everything in my power to make my students happy. If my student fails, it's kind of my fault, and those kinds of things. So what ends up happening is that teaching is now, kind of moved into a space where teachers are expected to be more caring than just good care, okay, and good warmth, but even more than that. And the term I've used to describe these teachers is treacle teachers. And treacle teachers are excessively sweet. Now, they kind of do it differently in the different age groups, but basically it's extreme reassurance, it's extreme responsiveness. So in the younger years, it's kind of speaking to children as if they're an idiot. Good morning, oh, you look so nice, and things like that. So really kind of overdoing the sweetness, okay? And that is a statement of reassurance to the child. Like, good morning, come in. Starts to be not good enough, okay? Particularly if they've had a treacle teacher last year who was much more that way. In the older years, I find it's kind of more a I'm cool, I'm your buddy sort of thing. So, hey, you better take that necklace off or else Mrs. Smith's going to see it and get you in trouble. But, like, I'm cool, I'm down with it. But, so it's much more amping up the relationship, okay, to not be teacher, student, but much more kind of friend. And so then in that environment, because it feels uncomfortable to be demanding of them, then there's much lower demands on them. Now, if not, there's not lower demands. The children still have to hand in everything and all of that sort of thing. They're either over-reminded to do their work, over-assisted. So what I call this is being Sherpa'd to success. So teachers are carrying a lot of the load in terms of children reaching or teens reaching the top of the mountain. And children have the belief they've done it, but they're not really capable of doing it by themselves, okay? They've been very much assisted, okay? So then they expect environments after school to be giving them similar levels of assistance. The big problem that's possibly occurring in your school is in the presence of these treacle teachers, authoritative teachers who are equally responsive and equally demanding. So they are warm, okay, they have a good relationship with students, but they are also demanding of them. Those teachers seem mean, okay, because there are these other super, super sweet ones, all right? So it becomes really problematic, particularly if your cohort starting with treacly type teachers and then the next year having a different teacher. Okay, so that's the parenting environment, that's the teaching environment. Let's now look at some scenarios. So the first one I want to talk about is that the home approach is different from the school approach. So let me just go through a couple of things. Now, excuse me, I'm going to call this a child-centered, extremely responsive, minimally demanding, okay, home approach. And that's where the child is very used to that approach. If they don't have that at school, school will always feel tougher, nastier. And so the child may start to view the school environment as mean or, not nice, or the demands, they might be not capable, not resilient enough to face age-appropriate demands, etc. This is particularly amped up if the previous teacher was treacle and now they kind of, with an authoritative teacher, they're going to think that teacher to be much meaner. And what you're going to end up hearing a lot from these children and from their parents is, my daughter says that this teacher doesn't like her, okay, because she's has been shown by continual reassurance, excessive warmth, etc. That's even what I'm finding a lot is, as I was saying before, if they are seeing a psychologist or a GP for their anxiety or something like that, they might request a child-centered, extremely responsive, minimally demanding environment. And the big thing I see this all the time is when a child gets in, the class lists come out, and the child gets into their not preferred teacher. They wanted the sweet one, but they sort of got the kind of, nice but demanding as well teacher. And so what they might do is really arc up to their parent sort of arcs up to the school holds their way. So the parent then goes to a psychologist, gets a letter from a psychologist or a GP, giving psychological reasons why this child should not be in that class. Now, look, okay, fine. If the child's anxiety is excessive now, but at some point in the future, that child needs to learn how to cope with non-extremely responsive environments and just good, averagely responsive environments, okay? They can't keep getting that level of reassurance. So it's holding off their development of resilience. So it doesn't actually teach them to face challenge, okay? That approach to kind of go easy on them all the time and do that every year. And really, psychologists should be treating the problem so the child can go with any teacher next year. Okay. The second scenario is school as a potential danger. And what this is when a parent views any sort of difficulty or distress or disappointment as being potentially traumatic. And many of you will have heard parents describe the trauma. My child is traumatized for not getting class captain, or my child is traumatized for not getting on the dance team for assembly. And that's because they view disappointment as being traumatic. And so parents are consistently looking for potential trauma because they're catastrophizing these things. And so sometimes the way the dynamic works is the child, after a while, picks up that the parent is looking for a problem all the time. So that child might kind of get in the car and supply one immediately, because often it's very beneficial. They know that the parent wants that, but also sometimes children get more rewarded for the problem. Like they come home, how was school? Great. Okay, no problem. But how was school? Oh, awful. I didn't get on the volleyball team. Oh, honey, come here. So they learn that they get much more attention for bad days than good days. Now, of course, some of them will have had bad days. Parents should be giving attention. But over a while, a child works out, hey, actually, my parent's looking for a problem. Now, this is particularly true if a parent is kind of protecting their role. If they see themselves as needing to be by their child's side all the time for their child to be safe, or a lot of these parents maybe have come from a very high-powered environment where they were a problem solver in the workplace and they're looking for a problem to solve every single day. And look, even, forgive me, but this is a girls' schools presentation, so I can say it. But often with female friendships, I've got to say, you want to find a problem in your friend so you can analyze it to death. How's your husband? Good. How's your work? Not good. Oh, let's talk about that for 3 hours. So it's kind of, I'm of no use to you unless I'm solving a problem to you. So it kind of fits into that as well. And what ends up happening, because there's a long car ride home, there's over-examination of minor issues. And we know from research that the longer you talk about something negative, the worse the negative impact is on you and the worse the situation seems. And I was going to talk on this topic at the Alliance conference in Hobart last year, which was, of course, cancelled. But really, the issue I'm seeing, even a kind of past problem. So say a year 7 child at a sort of P to 12 school had this friendship problems in year 4. the parent is still referring to it 3 years later, even though it was resolved and things like that. The parent is still looking, and they're very much focused on that time. They, let us down, and they're kind of looking for almost a justification that you really did not do your job. You let my child down, and they're still suffering the consequences, and they'll bring it up in many meetings. Okay, the third scenario I want to talk about is school as an easy common enemy. Now, this is very much in the older years at the point of individuation. Now, individuation is when parent and child very close in the early days, child very willing to do everything parent suggests. Let's go to the shop. Sure, I'm coming. Okay, I'd really like it if you cleaned up your room. Sure, I'll do it, because I want to please you. That a child will get to an age where they start to choose their friends' company over their parents, and they will start to actually want to spend more time, not want to just identify themselves as the daughter or son of the parent, but much more sort of start expanding. This is on the approach to being an individual, okay, to being an adult. So it's an essential age-appropriate process. Happens anywhere between sort of upper primary, middle upper primary. Even some kind of take a while, particularly if they're very best friendly with their parent. They might wait until kind of early high school. But generally, it's very important. But unfortunately, particularly a parent who's been very close to their child, then suddenly their child is not as close to them. And many parents will be trying to kind of get closer to their child again. Now, a child is trying to get those boundaries. So they start to really push back. It's like if someone's hanging around you at a party and you've kind of been subtle, and then you go, look, go away. Okay, the child is kind of doing that to the parent and getting very rude with them to try and get them to back off. Also, often not a lot of respect developed in the relationship. So what ends up happening is the parent is really looking to get close to the child again, okay? And they're looking for any opportunity to kind of get back in there. Now, in this situation, a school problem reconnects them. So it's kind of the easiest connection you can make with anybody. And I'll give you, like, if you were at a party and you just joined a workplace and you were at a party and you were talking to a colleague that you didn't know very well, the easiest way you can start a conversation and kind of get kind of close to them is start complaining about the manager or start complaining about the workplace, okay? Complaining about a common enemy brings you close. It's not a real closeness. You're not getting to know each other really well. You're just choosing an easy common enemy to fight with. And so what ends up happening, and this is particularly true, the parent is looking to kind of put down the very friends the child is choosing. So the parent might even be looking to have a friendship issue and things like that. They wouldn't be, they're not going, I'm going to prove that my child has got no friends or they're not good friends, but they're subtly, their desire to be close to their child sort of comes in and they start to kind of slightly or look for a friendship problem so they can get closer to their child. And so the trouble is when these parents come up to the school, even though their relationship with their child might be quite antagonistic at that time, they often try to really reunite together with their child. And often their child does unite very well with the parent when they are disputing that school detention, when they are disputing the fact that the child got the kind of penalty for handing in their work late. And look, in a way to keep their child's loyalty then, they might deny, the school might say, look, she's getting really aggressive or rude in class. And the parent she's not like that at all at home, even though that's not correct because she wants to kind of get back close in with the child. They might say, oh, she never lies at home and things like that, which is not true. Clever kids lie. So it's just, but the trouble is you can't do anything. And the worst thing is you can't give the parent assistance to manage their child because the parent's not mentioning it at all. But also the school can sometimes be a very convenient cause of current issues. If a child was doing very well in, say, primary and suddenly they're not doing as well or doing very well in prep and in year one, they're just struggling a bit, it's very easy for the school to be blamed. And this gets particularly big in the upper years where, like kind of basic concrete knowledge is replaced by abstract, and schools gets and subjects get harder. So it's very easy then in those upper years to blame the school and to join the child with how unfair it is that you're, not getting the results or getting on the team or whatever it is. But the other really interesting thing that's occurring is that often a parent of course, parents have chosen the school. Sometimes students choose the school, but look, okay, it's a joint decision. But a student might have always be niggling at the parent. I wanted to go to Success Grammar down the road and you've just sent me to Average Grammar, and I want to go, or I want to go to the cool state school down the road. And the parent is justified, no, you need to stay here, or no, we can't afford that school or whatever. So the child then gets in the car looking to have a go at the parent and using the school. Look, I got a uniform detention because this stupid school makes me wear this stupid uniform. Whereas if I went down to Cool State High down the road, I wouldn't have to wear that at all, or something. So it's just this constant having a go. And so in all these scenarios, a school problem is actually needed. Okay, so the consequences of these, much more complaints to parents, from parents to teachers. And often these parents go straight to the top because that makes it a bigger deal, okay? It's I need to see the manager, that sort of thing, rather than just dealing with the employee you got. So it's very much it's a lot of increase. But the big problem for schools, and I'm speaking particularly for the leadership teams out there, is that there's a huge cost. Even if only 20% of your parents are doing this, they're often taking up about 80% of your time. And when you look at your salary and you look at, that 80% of my salary is going on managing these couple of parents, then it becomes really not cost beneficial at all, okay? And not time beneficial at all. The other really big impact with this is the child it's with the best of intentions, the parent is trying to almost make the child not fit in, try to prove the child that the teacher's not, and so what ends up happening is school should be a basic area of belonging, but the child's not feeling like they fit in, okay? And so it stops a really important aspect of well-being, to be a leaf on a tree in a school. There's also an impact on teacher well-being to have all these parent complaints. But I've got to argue it stops the school's ability to deliver education as they know it works best. Okay, schools have been set up. The school camp is there for a reason. The sports day is there for a reason. Okay, and if their schools aren't giving those educational experiences to children, then the child really misses out on a full education. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is solutions. Okay, so I'm aware of time. I'm probably going to take another 3 minutes for this, and then we'll have 10 minutes of questions. Okay, so the really big, I can't stress enough, this is the true area of prevention, and this is parent education. And schools, unfortunately, I know you shouldn't have to do it, but I don't know where else it's going to come from. Unless you can get all your parents to read parenting columns like mine, or get all your parents to read, books like mine, then you're going to have to put it on. And there's going to be a benefit to you as well. But parents need to be educated very early about what are ideal parenting goals and parenting actions to prevent future problems, like the problem of individuation not going very well, or to stop current issues. Now, they need really practical, it's not enough to say you need to build their resilience, or, you should make them respect. You've got to give them. So the reason that my talks are a little bit longer than this sort of average, and why they're very age specific, like a primary school talk, or not a whole everybody parent in there, is because you need to make sure that all your content is relevant to the parents in front of you. And you need to give them really, okay, here's what you do when they get in the car and they said they had school problem. Here's what you do when they're not doing their homework and things like that. Here's what you do. Of course, look, having been a school counsellor, I know in an ideal world you could deliver at that, but there is a benefit to an outsider coming in because it doesn't look like they're justifying the school's decisions that have already been made. And look, there is a financial outlay. If you're not paying for these parenting talks, then you are the product. But the other thing I've got to say is choose wisely. It's really important that you get a registered practicing psychologist. And the reason I say that very very strongly is that you want someone whose parenting advice is based on clinical knowledge and clinical experience rather than just what's working in their family. Okay, so with the parenting bloggers, and if you're the really popular, so they've only sort of basically saying what they've done with their child, so just be very careful with that if that's possible. The essential times I'm going to say is early for prevention, but I also even before they come to school, getting them to sort of almost setting the tone for parents, so that parents back off a little bit and not up the school for every single thing. But also we need to at something at the end of primary or beginning of high, because that's when individuation's going on, things are going pear-shaped, child behaving very badly, so they need education at that point. And also I've got to say pre-year 12, I do all these kinds of talks, but I just, in the last couple of years, I've done a year 12 talk because I find that all the gains of the years before that, before senior, are lost in that senior where they're so sherpered, where they don't have to do chores and things like that. So I think parents and children need to be educated on, year 12 as being a year to help them transition into the next years. I also think teacher education is really important. The big thing you want to push back against is treacle teaching occurring in your school. So there's an inconsistency that they're sort of lulled into this, teacher's going to be writing nice notes home every week and students are going to get awards every day, to the next bit. So, there's got to be a consistency of approach, and sometimes you will need to kind of really, because a lot of the teachers that are adopting treacle think they're the best teachers at the school. But also strategies for parent complaints. That is not, in an ideal world, I could tell you exactly what to do now, but for me, that's a 2-hour session giving teachers practical strategies for justifying their professional decisions and a clear way of doing that. But also I think teachers need to observe parenting sessions as well, so they can see the advice that is being handed out, okay? And they know what the parents have been told, even the advice I've given them about what to do with homework. The other thing I'm just going to say very quickly is school policies as well. Setting up your school policies to actively push back against overparenting and empower student autonomy. So I'm saying, there's a lot of them, but I'm going to say just briefly, email policy. Teachers should not be answering angry emails from parents at 6 o'clock at night when they've just heard the story from their child and they're in capital letters in red. Teachers should not be answering that, because there's a reassurance if teachers consistently answer a question as it comes in at any time. And if the teacher in the year previous does that, then the next teacher is kind of seen as lacking because they're not answering their emails all day and all weekend and things like that. The other thing that's really, so having a consistent thing across staff, clear, policy, so they're not going to the top. If this is a uniform issue, a uniform detention issue, you see this person, but you don't insist that you speak the deputy principal and things like that. So the parents are absolutely aware of who to see for what issue. That becomes really, and even students are aware of that as well. But even, to stop that kind of lengthy analysis all the way home, encouraging much more public transport, walking school buses, things like that. So you kind of try and nip that in the bud. But look, there's also, even if they do have to drive long distances, educating parents about the right way to process the school day so they're able to listen to any problems, empower the child to kind of respond appropriately, or get the child to think about it differently so it's more helpful, or whatever it is. But it's got to be done in a way that doesn't exacerbate the problem and make it worse. Okay, they're the references. Look back on the video if you want to see those. Just briefly, just about the 2 books I've written, just because I've had a few questions about the difference. Bonsai Child is very much kind of what is overparenting, with the best of intentions, this is what they're doing, this is the impact. And then I talk it's for parents, very practical strategies, how to decrease responsiveness, have a good relationship with your child, consequences, demandingness, all of that sort of thing. The Bonsai Student is much more the school experience. And what it is very much kind of recap on the environment. And then it's really talking about the pressure on schools. I actually talk about treacle teaching. I talk about, the 5 essential skills that kids need. That's a long chapter. It's probably my favorite chapter I've ever written. But then I talk really, again, kind of practical strategies on homework, processing school days, year 12, all of that sort of thing. Okay, there's ways to contact me should you need to. As you've already heard, I write a column, but that column is actually, if you can't get a newspaper or if Google won't let you see it, then you've got, if you want to link in with me or follow me, I don't mind either way. I put those columns on there, and also I put them on my Facebook page, Confident and Capable or Bonsai Child. Okay, are there any questions? Now I'll just, I think I might stop the share. Oh no, I'll leave that on and then we can, yeah, because there's no, yep, okay.
Hi, Judith. Thanks. You must be exhausted. That was so packed with information. We haven't had any live questions, but I do have a couple of questions that people submitted earlier. So let me start with the first one, which may be more of a comment. Anxiety in young girls seems to have heightened. And I know that you've partly addressed that, but you might want to add something.
The thing that frustrates me the most about anxiety right now is that it is not always properly addressed. And I've actually done some work with a couple of girls' schools in Brisbane recently where we've talked actively about pushing back against what I think is sometimes bad treatment, where you don't go to a psychologist for the anxiety to be, it's like I don't go to the doctor to be weighed and to be told I'm, overweight and then get a letter that, justifies me. It's much more about, okay, to say that someone is anxious is step one. Step two with any treatment, psychological treatment, is to treat the anxiety. And really, that's what frustrates me. They should not be seeing psychologists for years. They should not have a letter that stands for the rest of their life where they're excused from anything challenging, okay? Now, of course, I'm not talking about pervasive developmental disorders like autism here. I'm talking things that really can be treated by cognitive behavioral therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy that is not being treated properly in preference to chat therapy. And I think that can make it much worse. So I do think schools have a role to push back against that a little bit. Of course, I am not in any way suggesting all psychologists are doing this. If anything, I am seeing it occur just a little bit more, and I'm really concerned about it because that's a lot of money there are some kids who have seen a psychologist for 3 years for their anxiety. And the thing that really concerns me about that is that often when a child is seeing a psychologist, it puts a parent on eggshells, and a parent then feels they can't have the right to have appropriate demands, like they're letting their child off chores because their child is, depressed or anxious. Whereas we know a child doing a few chores, it's much more likely to make them feel better about themselves at the end of it. They're contributing to family and things like that. So even screaming at their mother or father all the time can't make them feel good. Parents need to learn strategies to manage that so the child isn't screaming at them all the time, so the child has better well-being. So that's the thing that frustrates me about anxiety right now.
And Kim, thanks for your question, just come online. How do we address practitioners' documents who support ongoing exemptions from a number of activities?
Yeah, that is such, and I would love, because I really want to work with some schools on pushing this, pushing back against this. I really want to, where you get the letter from the person and then you write back. And you go, great, okay, so tell me what you're doing and tell me what's happening and when can we expect the child to be going back. And actively, and even in my parenting talks now, I actively educate parents on the fact that the majority of students will not need to see a psychologist for years, okay? That treatment should, and as I can picture his name, Gavin Andrews in Sydney talks about the fact that if you're not seeing any improvement after 6 sessions with a psychologist, get a different psychologist, because you should see improvement over time. And for most issues, 12 sessions is enough. So I do think, you've got to be careful of those psychologists that treat everybody in the school, but they just keep going. So I think you can have a role by actually referring to psychologists in your area who you know have good results, who you know have improved situations. But look, it's really hard when you get that letter. Well, what do you do? Do you know, I get it. It's really hard. So it's just it's a challenge. I know that's some solutions, but look, if anybody out there wants to work with me on that, I'd be more than happy to start that process, because I think it's very important.
And Julia, thanks for popping this one in the chat. How do we address friendship groups validating each other by their mental health concerns and diagnoses?
Just confirm if you can answer. Are you saying that the kind of contagion effect of, say, one cuts and then the others cut? Can you just go yes or no? Is that, that kind of, because I do think
no is the response.
No, okay. So you're talking about the fact that when a child expresses that they're anxious, the rest of the group kind of go easy on them, or maybe I should hear the question again.
How do we address friendship groups validating each other by their mental health concerns and diagnoses?
Yeah, look, I do think there's a kind of a mental health diagnosis these days is a little bit sexy. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it's kind of going, and to see the therapist regularly and stuff like that. So I know, but I think you can't sit there and go, that mental health diagnoses, aren't worth the paper they're written on. But I think pushing ideas of resilience and things like that, and very much sort of working towards things improving, rather, nothing should be seen as static. And that's the thing I don't like about this. And you even hear parents saying, my child has got anxiety, as if it's forever. And we know that it can be treated. So I do think students need to be educated about this as well, that it is something. And even I think teachers sometimes I know Simon Sinek talks a lot about the fact that, labeling nerves differently, labeling it not as anxiety, but just as excitement, or, as it being as understandable and that sort of thing. So I think probably the process of education needs to happen for everybody.
And one last question here from Katrina. Thanks for the presentation, Judith. I've observed a lot of what you spoke about in school environments and within parenting trends over the years. And these are systematic issues that are hard to shift and take time and require buy-in from the whole system. Have you had experience of systems changing through the practical solutions you spoke about, and over what time frame did it occur?
I'm so glad you've asked this question, because I've got a couple of schools that has occurred. So there's a school that I work at. I won't say which school, but there's a school I've worked with very regularly. They get me to speak to their parents before they show up. They've got me to do parenting talks. Indeed, they give my bonsai child book to every new parent that turns up at the school. And what they have noticed over time, fewer parents calling them, parents actually referring to concepts I'm talking about. They have seen a complete turnaround. Even a parent talk that night. I have had feedback from schools, because often I do 2 nights at a school. So I come back into the school the next day. I've done primary and then I do secondary. And some of the teachers are saying that they have, parents have actually contacted them and said, I saw Judith Locke speak last night. I don't need to come up. I'll cancel that meeting I had with you. I'm going to let my daughter sort this out. So there is, but look, it's not, and in some ways there's a repeat you need to do. It's sort of in a repeated way, because I'm going to say, a lot of people think that the parents that need this don't turn up, but I've got to say, I don't find that necessarily correct. There are a lot of parents that turn up to my talks and think that I'm going to say everything they're doing is correct. And they drag their partner along, often their husband. They drag him along, and you need to learn, that what I'm doing, and you need to do it. And I see through the talk, their husband digging them and saying, I told you, yes, I told you. But so there are some that show up and think they're going to be, the ducks of the class. So I do think, but look, you need to kind of repeat it, because not everybody's going to show up. It's an investment. You're completely right. It's an investment, but it can turn things around. And even if you turn around only 10%, the gains for the school are going to be enormous in terms of less fending off questions and better child resilience and better child wellbeing. So it's a process though.
Thank you, Judith. We'll have to end it there, but I hope that that's provided some answers and practical help and guidance for the challenges of managing parents and the 3 p.m. bad news bulletin. We will send out a short feedback questionnaire as well as the link to the recording. And just before you go, a quick mention of our next virtual event, which is the 2021 Summit on Girls Education, that's going to be held over 2 days in May, the 11th and 12th, and featuring US-based educators and authors, including Dr. Lisa Damore, Dr. Ron Rickard, and Dr. Barbara Blackburn. And the best bit, it is free for Alliance members, and you are Alliance members. So if your school is a member of the Alliance, you're entitled to free registration. So hop on our website and secure your place now. So that wraps up the 3 p.m. Bad News Bulletin. Thank you for joining us, and thank you so much, Judith, and stay safe. I hope we see you on screen for our May Summit. Thank you.